Well, everyone, we finally got our hands on the brand new iPads, the iPad 10.2 inch. I did order or pre-order the iPad Air, so whenever that comes in, I'll go and I'll review that one too. But I want to go ahead and compare the brand new 10.2 inch iPad, that base model iPad, to last year's 10.2 inch iPad, which is more or less the same thing. There's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of differences. But I'll definitely tell you, when it comes down to both of these, the pricing structure of these iPads is extremely impressive in my opinion. Now, pricing wise, both of them started off at $329. The iPad 10.2 inch from last year, the 2019 model, is not really, available anymore. The 7th generation is what they call it. That one is not available. You cannot really purchase it anymore, brand new from Apple, but you can still pick it up on eBay, and I think Best Buy has discounted a lot of them too. So I'll find the cheapest one on Amazon if they're still selling them there and link it down in the description below, as well as the 8th generation, which is retailing for $329. You can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off, there's a lot of similarities between them. The front panel, for the most part, is exactly the same size, the same 10.2 inch display. It's still 1620 by 2160, and like I said, both of them are both the same panels. Now, with the 8th generation, apparently there is a little bit of a benefit. Apparently it does have a higher brightness, so that is something to keep in mind. Again, if you're into that, then that's cool. If you don't really care, then of course the 7th gen is going to be great. You have, a little bit of the same exact design as well, the front-facing camera, and still the home button. This is one of the last iPads I think that's going to be released with a home button on it. The iPad Air has taken out that home button. This one still has it, so keep that in mind. I don't even think this design is really that bad, considering if you just look back a couple years, we had like the iPad Pros, the 12.9 inch ones that still had the home button, and that was retailing for a ton of money. This one doesn't cost that much, and it still has a pretty old design, but it's totally okay. And when I'm holding it in the hand and when I'm scrolling through pages or whatever, it really doesn't look like a bad iPad at all. And that's another really important thing to keep in mind. The display isn't really that bad. If you're comparing it to an iPhone display or iMac display or MacBook display or another iPad display, it might not be the best, but I still think this one is very good for the time being, and it'll definitely get the job done for sure. They both have lightning ports on the bottom, no USB Type-C, which is totally okay, I think. And on the back, single camera setups, so no LiDAR sensor, which I wasn't expecting. And like I said, more or less these things are exactly the same. If you held up one iPad, the 7th generation and the 8th generation, you would not be able to tell the differences. They are almost identically the same, and that's not really a bad thing, For a newer iPad like this, if it was costing, $3,000 or $1,000 or $500, I think a lot more people may be a little upset, but for the fact that it costs what it costs, it's really just a performance upgrade. That is still another really important thing. So I still think this is actually really good, and it's way better than not. No IP certification, nothing like that. And both of these do still support Apple Pencil. So they only support the 1st generation, so keep that in mind. Do not buy the Apple Pencil 2 if you're trying to get these two iPads. Get the Apple Pencil 1, the one you have to stick into the lightning port. And, Apple really has, focused in this Apple Pencil craze for these iPads, and I've owned the Apple Pencil. I just bought the Apple Pencil 2 actually, and I reviewed the original Apple Pencil, and I think it's great. I think they're awesome. I definitely like drawing, and I love taking notes, which I don't even take those many notes, but if I do jot down something, I like, doing it on an iPad rather than wasting a paper and pencil. And if you're somebody who uses an Apple Pencil every single day, you're definitely going to enjoy still maintaining that type of functionality on the iPad 10.2 inch, whether it's the 7th gen or the 8th gen. So in terms of the outside, that really pretty much covers it up for the most part. Now, in terms of the software, this is probably one of the bigger differences between these two, and you might be wondering why that's the case. Now, let me put it this way, okay? The iPad 7th generation pretty much has the same chipset as the iPhone 7, so keep that in mind. iPhone 7 is pretty much the same thing as the iPad 8th gen in terms of the chipset inside of it. The new iPad 8th generation, the new one that came out a year after, has the same chipset as the iPhone XS and XS Max and the iPhone XR. So kind of keep that in mind. You might look at these two things and just assume, oh, one came out a year later or a year earlier, so it's only going to last 1 year more. In terms of software, that's not necessarily the case. If you look at a phone like the iPhone XS and the iPhone 7, you can easily tell which one's going to be lasting longer. One came out in 2016, the other one came out in 2018. And in this case, I would say that's exactly the same case, but I don't know how much longer the iPad 7 generation is going to last. I know it's probably not going to end, on iPadOS 14. I think it's probably going to get another version of software, so iPadOS 15. That means the iPhone 7 will also get iOS 15. Maybe the 6S will get it, probably not. So that means, in my opinion, the iPad 7 generation is probably going to get one more version of software at least. It could get two, but at probably the most realistic, it's probably going to be one more version, so iPadOS 15. Where if you get the iPad 8th generation right now, first of all, this iPad kind of has the same chipset as the iPad Pro, the 3rd gen, and the 4th gen kind of, and those are the 12Z and 12X. But they're still based kind of around that Apple A12 chip, which is what's inside the iPad 8 generation. Now, this thing, I think, is probably going to at least last, up until like iPadOS 16 or 17. But even then, maybe it'll go one more version on top of that. So it's going to last for a very long time. It's going to last a couple more years longer than what the iPad 7 generation is going to last. So don't expect it just to last 1 year longer. It's probably going to be, at least 2 in my opinion. So out of all the software that I've seen, that's usually what happens. So in terms of these two, software-wise, the iPad 8th generation will definitely win when it comes down to software longevity. Now, in terms of the performance standpoint, the iPad 7 generation has that Apple A10 Fusion chip, a quad-core CPU, and 3 gigs of RAM on each model, where the iPad 8 generation has that Apple A12 Bionic chip, hex-core CPU, and 3 gigs of RAM as well. Now, in my opinion, these two iPads are actually extremely fast. I think the iPad 8th generation is the faster one. It's just a given. Apple actually gave out some things out too. They said it's 40% faster than the previous generation. That's their claim. They said it's 2 times faster in the graphics as well. And I'll definitely tell you, the A12 chip was a really, really big step up. I think, especially from like an A11, the A12 was extremely fast. Actually, I think the A11 was extremely fast too. But the A12 chip is extremely fast. But I also think the A10 Fusion chip was good enough for the most part. If you're doing a lot of, note-taking, if you're doing a lot of document stuff and, writing papers and viewing videos and multitasking and stuff, I definitely do think the iPad 7 generation is still going to do you better. And I think Apple is really focusing these specific iPads on students, and for typical student things, writing notes and filling out documents and submitting papers and web browsing and all that stuff. I think an iPad like this, the 7th generation, would still probably do you really, really good. I think there's not going to be too many problems with it. But if you want a little bit of a faster, not even just a little bit, if you want a noticeably faster experience, definitely going to the iPad 8th generation will definitely do you better, probably in the long run, even in the short term. If you just need a quick device that'll even you want to bring with your MacBook and just have your notes up or something, the iPad 8th generation will probably give you a better experience. Unfortunately, they have the same amount of RAM, which is kind of weird. So if you're trying to multitask a ton of and keep a lot of apps in the background and stuff, most probably, both of these are not going to do you well. The A12 chip will probably do you better though, but still, I'll definitely tell you, in terms of performance, expect the iPad 8th generation to be better. That's what I found in my experience, but everyone's case could be different. Maybe you don't even care about the performance. So that's another really, really big thing to keep in mind. I would say, Apple's claim of 40%, maybe, it's about 40%. I didn't measure it, but I would say it's faster and smoother than an iPad 7 generation, in my opinion. So in terms of performance, that pretty much covers it. Now, hitting on the cameras, they're both the exact same sensors. They both have 8 megapixel sensors. Both can do 1080p at 30 frames. The exact same front cameras as well, 1.2 megapixels at 720p. So if you're taking, videos, which I wouldn't recommend on an iPad, but if you're doing, conference calls, if you're doing a lot of, FaceTimes or whatever with students or your coworkers or whatever, this thing does have capability of the front camera, which is nice. Now, it's not the best quality, as I said before, 1.2 megapixels, but, it'll get the job done for the most part, I think. And for sure, I think, it's a thumbs up. At least it has a camera. You know what I mean? If you want a better camera, you can go for an iPad Air or iPad Pro. Now, ending it off with the battery life, unfortunately, Apple did not give us the milliamp hours for the battery yet. So I would assume it's probably going to be around the same size. If they kept the same megapixel count, the same cameras, the same screen, the same body, most probably the battery size is probably the same too. So the iPad 7 generation had a 8,827 milliamp hour battery, and this new iPad probably has around that same battery size too. But what I'll tell you is that Apple has done a really good job at maintaining their battery life on their iPads. These things haven't really degraded that much in battery. I own like a ton of iPads, and none of them have really had a really bad experience with battery life. I think for the most part, if you're going to go and use this thing on a daily basis, you're definitely going to be having a really decent battery life experience, in my opinion. If you're going to walk from one part of campus to the other, then yeah, it's still going to be perfectly fine in terms of battery life. So in terms of that, that pretty much covers it up. Now, to answer the question, should you pick up the iPad 7th generation or pick up the iPad 8th generation? In my opinion, you're probably going to have a better experience overall picking up the iPad 8th generation. It just makes more sense. It's a little bit more money. It's the same price as the 7th generation was just like a couple weeks ago. But you have to keep in mind that with the 8th generation, you're getting a faster CPU, and that's really all you're paying for. You're not really paying for anything else, which is a pretty big thing to keep in mind. Again, with the 7th generation, if you currently own it, I would highly recommend keeping it. There's really no point in going up to the 8th generation. Keeping that 7th generation iPad will probably do you better, at least for like another year. Apple is obviously going to release another iPad next year, so you're going to be perfectly fine for the time being. But again, if you're expecting, to get a way better experience, it's probably going to come in the form of an iPad Air 3, in my opinion. If you have a little bit more money, getting the iPad Air 3, like I said before, will probably get you a better experience. You'll have, a newer design, the bezel-less kind of display with the home button, a better looking display, a better looking camera on the front and the back. And it's just a better feeling device, and you have Apple Pencil 2 support. On these iPads, you don't really have Apple Pencil 2 support. You have the 1st gen, but that's another thing you can go and update to. Between these two, the 8th generation is definitely the top tier one in my opinion. The 7th generation is at least, it can do like 90% of what the 8th generation can do. So that's really pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my 2nd channel. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.